Chapter 237 Paying Respects. Great Development Technique. This was what Han Li had repeatedly heard of from senior martial brother Lin, the cultivation technique that the primordial soul tried to entice him with. He was actually able to rummage through his body as he wished and easily found it. This caused Han Li to feel ecstatic beyond belief. This great development technique had actually been carried on senior martial Lin's body. This truly went against his expectations. Han Li truly didn't know whether this senior martial brother Lin had been extremely stupid or extremely clever. He quickly skimmed through the jade slip with the great development technique once through and found that it was as senior martial Lin had said. There truly were only incantations up to the 4th layer. However, what appeared next caused Han Li to feel even more shocked. After he finished completely looking through the great development technique, a scripture called the True Puppet Insights appeared immediately afterward, completely instructing him on how to refine puppet beasts and soldiers of all grades. It was a very detailed and extraordinary puppet creation collection. After Han Li looked through it for a moment, he immediately withdrew his excited consciousness and wore an extremely happy expression. But after he looked at the jade slip in his hand, he soon thought of something, and his expression suddenly became strange. The great development technique and the true puppet insights were a pair. If he simultaneously cultivated them, they would be flawless together. So long as he cultivated the both of them to a certain layer, he would surely be like Huang Long, a single person who relied on a great amount of puppets to remain unwavering against several cultivators of the same strength level and didn't give them the slightest opportunity to resist. This kind of power that suppressed other Foundation establishment cultivators caused Han Li's heart to thump. However, he was very clear that there was a certain flaw. It was very possible that it would interfere with his own cultivation and cause his originally indistinct chances of core formation to be completely null. This was a matter where the gains did not make up for the losses. As for the odds that the great development technique could promote core formation, Han Li simply did not trust that kind of baseless nonsense. Han Li lowered his head and pondered for a moment. This was a very hard choice. He shook his head and first put away the jade slip into his storage bag before deciding to deal with it in the future. After all, deciding whether to cultivate the great development technique along with the puppet creation technique that had dropped from the sky was a bit too sudden. This was a matter to be thought over after his heart calmed down. Regardless, this harvest had caused Han Li to be excited. He suddenly thought that although the storage pouches of Huang Long and his fellow disciples had all been thoroughly decimated by Lei Wan's lightning attribute Sword Light, there were a few puppets that they had not retrieved in time still standing outside the formation. These were good items that would be a waste not to acquire. With this thought, Han Li left the great formation in a good mood. As expected, not far from the formation's outer boundary, he found many palm-sized puppet soldiers and mechanical beasts that had shrunk since nobody was controlling them. However, there weren't as many as Han Li had imagined, only about 20. The rest had been turned to ash by Lei Wang's sword light. But even if that was the case, Han Li collected them one by one while in high spirits. In one moment, he managed to sweep up so many good items. Han Li still wished to continue, wishing for hundreds of more puppet soldiers to appear before his eyes so he could gather them all. Han Li found this attitude of his to be laughable. This greed was truly insatiable. After a few words of self-mockery, Han Li returned to his Immortal's cave and prepared to study the ancient formulas. The next day he would go to where his master, Li Huaiwen, lived and see whether or not he could get some decent cultivation techniques. The morning of the next day, Han Li stood on his divine wind boat and flew straight toward the eastern part of the Taiyue mountain range. Yesterday, Lei Wan had told him that his master's Immortal's cave was located at the peak of a particular mountain. It also seemed that Li Huaiwen was busy with something inside his Immortal's cave. If there was a moment to go find him, now was the time. With the speed of the divine wind boat, Han Li didn't have to spend much time to find the region that Lei Wan had pointed out. As expected, the location was well hidden by an azure mountain and green rivers. Han Li stood at the mountain peak above a huge waterfall and took out a sound transmission talisman from his bosom. He softly spoke a few words and then threw it out. The talisman then turned into a stream of fiery light, rushing toward the huge waterfall and disappearing from sight. After the time it took an incense stick to burn, the curtain of water separated, revealing a large cave. Then, from within, a slim Confucian scholar who appeared over 30 years old flew out. When he saw Han Li, he immediately gave a warm greeting. "Are you junior martial disciple Han? This one is Master's eldest disciple, Yu Kun. You can call me senior martial brother Yu." After the Confucian scholar said this, he flew down with great ease, arriving by Han Li's side. He then looked at Han Li with a wide smile. "I pay respects to eldest senior martial brother." Han Li shouted this out of extremely caution. When this eldest senior martial brother Yu Kun saw Han Li's expression and his well-behaved greeting, his smile became even stronger. He said even more amiably, "Don't call me eldest senior martial brother." "Eldest senior martial brother? That is far too formal. Just address me as senior martial brother Yu. I have already heard of junior martial brother's situation from Master. Junior martial brother Han was actually able to acquire such a large harvest from the trial by blood and fire. That truly was a remarkable feat." Yu Kun repeatedly praised him. Han Li played along with a few forced laughs. He didn't know why this person was so courteous to this unnamed disciple. It caused him to be quite uneasy. "I originally heard that junior martial disciples' aptitude wasn't very good. But now, I see you have actually reached foundation establishment. This is truly a matter worthy of celebration." Yu Kun seemed to have been long aware that Han Li had reached foundation establishment. As a result, he hadn't expressed any surprise toward Han Li's success in entering foundation establishment. However, he still incessantly congratulated Han Li. This caused Han Li to become even more suspicious and vigilant. "That's right, Master is still waiting inside the cave for junior martial disciple. It's better to not let our elders wait for long. Let's first enter the Green Ripple Cave." It seemed Yu Kun had just thought of something. After he patted the back of his head, he said this with a chuckle. When Han Li saw the other party's expression, the corner of his mouth twitched, but his face maintained a solemn and respectful expression. He agreed at once and flew through the water curtain. After he passed through the water curtain, a small, naturally formed valley appeared before his eyes. Not only was it as beautiful as a spring day, but the trees were green and the water clear. Furthermore, there were a few remarkably strange small animals jumping about in an adorable manner. This is? Han Li's mind tumbled. The scene before him, could it be that his own master, a respected expert, was fond of raising small animals? The thought barged into Han Li's mind unexpectedly. What? Is junior martial brother surprised? You're not the only one who reacted this way. Every visitor that comes is astonished. However, these weren't raised by Master but rather are the treasures of Master's wife. You mustn't harm them by any means, else the mistress will absolutely end you. Yu Kun chuckled, revealing an "I already knew you would be greatly surprised" expression. Master's wife? That's right. Although Mistress Zan is only at mid-stage foundation establishment, the Master dotes on her very much. You must act good-natured and get along well with her. Yu Kun said this as he shrugged his shoulders. Yu Kun brought him further into the large cave, where much to Han Li's surprise, he saw not only his master, Li Huaiwen, but also a young, beautiful, 27 or 28-year-old woman. Nothing needed to be said about his own master's ice-cold face, but when he saw Han Li, Li Huaiwen revealed a slight smile. Although Han Li thought the young woman was beautiful, how could he dare to look in front of Li Huaiwen? He only took a quick look and stepped forward, respectfully saluting. Disciple Han Li greets Master. You've come. This is your master's wife, greet her as well. Li Huaiwen was greatly satisfied with Han Li's respectful and solemn bearing and pointed to the young woman at his side. Disciple pays respects to Master's wife. Han Li inwardly sighed. He could only salute to this woman who didn't seem much older than himself. That's enough, no need to be overly polite. When the young woman saw Han Li step forward to pay his respects, she said this with a smile. Her voice was soft and pleasant, displaying the sweet temper of a woman from a river village. As expected, she was an extremely dainty woman. Han Li, I've only heard of the matter of your success into Foundation establishment a few days ago. To tell the truth, this matter was rather hard for me to believe and amazed me by no small amount. Li Huaiyuan said this with a smile and an incomparably gentle tone. This caused Han Li to truly feel overwhelmed by his superior's favor. This was disciple's fluke. Achieving Foundation establishment also shocked this disciple. Han Li's face was slightly red, appearing as if he were embarrassed. Great luck also reflects one's own aptitude. Otherwise, wouldn't those born with outstanding aptitudes have even greater luck? Li Huaiyuan shook his head and said this with a smile. This. Not once did Han Li think he would feel so embarrassed and be rendered speechless.